Thank you so much for coming today for our AWS Loves Startups meetup. I think it times it perfectly with Las Vegas Startup Week. So we're happy to have Derek Jamison here with us, Senior Cloud Application Architect for AWS. And before we get going, I just want to let you know that this user group for AWS is supported by Visionaries NV, which is a great resource for you all involved in startups. So if you want to learn more about the resources that Visionaries NV offers startups at any stage of your journey, you can grab one of those stickers that has a QR code on it. And obviously we have AWS stickers for you too. That's about it for me. I think I'll pass the microphone to Derek to start this meeting. I'm super excited to learn more about how AWS supports startups. And that's like the microphone I need to pass on. It's not really, it's not so like.
So this microphone's for the camera. It doesn't amplify my voice. So if you can't hear me, just raise your hand or something.
And I'm sorry, just one more thing. If you're not a member of our startup, of our user group here in Vegas, we do a lot of events AWS related, all levels of knowledge. You can just scan the QR code. It's the meetup link. Sorry, I was supposed to say that earlier, but it's okay. I just passed that on here.
No, this is good. And so this is an official AWS meetup, but I want to make something clear. AWS does not run the show here. These are run by local community folks. And if it weren't for our organizer, Maria, this wouldn't be happening. So all credit to her for putting this together. And thank you. Please do sign up. You'll get notices about our meetings and events in the future. All right, thanks for coming. How many of you are currently building something on AWS? Okay, quite a few. How many of you are thinking about or want to build something on AWS? Some others? All right, cool. You're in the right spot. I'm Derek Jamison. So I'm a senior cloud application architect, and before I joined AWS about 5 years ago, I was working in startups here in Las Vegas. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about how startups can operate on AWS and the resources that we have from idea stage through growth mode. And we'll finish with some tricks, some tools, some resources that you can use to build on AWS. You'll see it starts out kind of an early stage startup. We're going to build through growth stage as we cover these topics. And feel free to jump in anytime with a question. Just put your hand up. So these are startups who operate on AWS. And you probably recognize some of these. A lot of these are household names. It's hard to even believe they're a startup anymore. Some of these are old. Like, here's Reddit down here, right? So in 2009, Reddit migrated to AWS, back when both AWS and Reddit were pretty young. But these companies have their early days on AWS, and today, 80% of unicorns operate on AWS. So these are private companies worth more than $1 billion that are running on AWS. And if we look at just the AI ML-based startups, those unicorns, 96% of them are running on AWS today. So why is that? Why pick AWS? Why did I pick it when I was at a startup? We trace a lot of what we do today to our early days. Amazon, of course, started in a garage. AWS started as a startup within Amazon. And there's a lot that we do to keep that startup culture alive. From the early days, Jeff Bezos recognized that early excitement, those initial days where you can take risks and move fast, were going to be hard to keep going as the company got older and bigger. And so he laid out some ways that we can keep the startup culture alive. We called it the day one mentality, that first day of being a company. If you're looking for a way to structure your startup, take a picture of this. These things on the left are principles that we abide by. The things on the left or the things or on the right are the things that we're afraid of. I'll just highlight a couple of these. The last two maybe. You might have heard at AWS about our small teams. So we structure our engineering teams so that it can be fed by two pizzas. And that means that team, from idea through building and shipping, can own that product. They can move quickly. And then they have this sense of ownership over that thing that they own. So how do we deal with like a really big service like S3? Well, it's lots of those teams, right? The last one, that one takes discipline. So, as a startup, you want quick results, right? This one is really a focus on long-term value. And as a builder, and you're building something on AWS, this means architecting and building for the future so you can grow. And so the thing that you're establishing is going to last for a long time. Other reasons why startups are picking AWS. So today, AWS has more than 200 fully featured services. We think of them like building blocks. And if you're just getting started, I get it. That sounds intimidating. There's 200 things to choose from. How could I possibly get started? There's one called Ground Station. Does anyone know what Ground Station does? It lets you communicate with satellites. Okay? Now, most of you are probably not going to use that one, not today. But that's the nature of these services. They're there, and when you need them, you can bring them into what you're using. You're going to start with just a few of these. And across some basics like compute and security and networking, databases, you'll build your initial application and then add pieces as you need them and evolve that over time. We're going to talk now about some programs that AWS has specifically for startups. And these are popular. I can tell you that a startup signs up for these programs about once every 10 minutes. And it's super easy to do. We're going to talk about programs through each of these phases of a startup's growth. Early days, I've just got an idea, all the way through, I need more customers and I need to grow. I'm looking to add revenue. But let's start with AWS Activate. So in this program, you can get started really simply. We'll show you the URL in a second, but it's startups.aws. You're going to create an account. The account's free. It's an AWS Builder ID. And then you can apply to these programs. The one on the left is probably applicable to most of us. And in this one, you can get access to $1,000 in AWS credits. There's only 4 requirements. All right. First one, you haven't gotten the credits before. The second one, you're either self-funded or are before your Series B round of fundraising. The third requirement, you have a functioning company website. Not the thing that you're building, right, but just a website where someone could learn about your company. And the fourth one, you have to be founded in the last 10 years. So that's it. Those are the 4 requirements for the founders credits. If you're working with a VC fund, an accelerator, an incubator, ask them. They might be one of the Activate partners. And if you are part of their portfolio, you can get access to even more credits, up to $100,000. Again, it starts with creating that account, making an application, and going through the process. Regardless, everyone gets access to these discounts. These are discounts on things you're probably going to use anyway. I know at our startups we use 2, 3, or more of these. These are just common tools, and you can get discounts through this program. This is the website, startups.aws. If you don't have a builder ID, you can create an account here and then apply to the Activate program, get access to network with other startups, and then the other mentoring, other resources we're going to talk about in a second. Startups.aws. Okay, what if you've already started building and you're not on AWS, but you want to come over? Does that apply to anyone here? Possibly, okay. So we have a program to migrate. And this gives you access to a solution architect that can help to plan out what we call the landing zone. Like, where's your app going to land on AWS? What's the architecture? How are the accounts structured? Funding's available to work with a partner to pick up your application and move it to AWS. And so if you contact the startups team, you can talk through your use case, tell them where you're coming from, why you want to move, and they can help you through that journey. One company that did that, this is Octo, not Okta. This company helps people to manage their personal and private information. And they said, we want to move. We've already built and are running. And with AWS, they found a partner. AWS provided some funding. They made a plan to move the application. And it landed on AWS where they operate today. All right, we're now transitioning from maybe those early days, idea stage, beginning building. Before I move on, any questions on Activate or the Migrate program? No? All right. Okay, so now you're building. You're actively making stuff on AWS. Maybe you've got customers and you're stuck. You need help. I'm going to tell you what I did when I was at a startup, and it is not the thing to do. Okay, we had this daily spike of traffic. It was like to the second. Every day at the same time, 90% of our traffic came in 20 or 30 minutes. Well, that was easy to plan for. We could scale out. We had resources. We could handle the traffic. And then we would scale in as traffic died down, so we're not paying for all that excess capacity. But we were still breaking stuff. We were breaking databases and other services. And this was 10 years ago. And I was trying to figure things out on my own, couldn't solve it. And then I saw that there was going to be an AWS event here in town. Does anyone remember the work in progress on 6th Street? So they had a classroom down there. And I went down there, listened to the whole presentation, and then as soon as they said thanks, I rushed up and I said, okay. And then I unloaded all of my problems on this poor guy and told him what was going on. He went to the whiteboard. He was very nice. We found a solution. Don't do that. Don't wait. Help's available, and through that same website and account, you can get access to expert help. On that startups.aws, you can come and have a conversation. Maybe it's a big one, like, hey, I just want to add Gen AI to my solution. Maybe it's something specific, like I need to optimize this for cost. You can get access not only to technical help, but to people who have been through startups to help with developing your product, strategy. There's a ton of help available on that website. The build program is if you need a little bit more than just some guidance. And similar to the Migrate program, you work with the AWS startup team to identify what it is that you need to solve. They attach a solution architect to talk to you about what you're trying to accomplish, put together a plan, and then there's funding available so that AWS will basically hire a partner to come and build that for you and give it to you. This can be really powerful. There's no formal set of requirements I could tell you on this one. Talk to the startups team if you think you could use some help. But I can tell you can contact them through that same website. One company that went through this was Creative Fabrica. They're using Gen AI so that users can, for free, generate text and images, and they needed some help so that they could scale that out and optimize for cost. They worked with AWS, came up with a plan. They identified a partner. In this case, it was ML6. And ML6 went and built something so that they could operate on EC2 and ECS. They gave it to Creative Fabrica, and now they're generating millions of images and text inferences for their customers. So just an option. Speaking of generative AI, we had a session, it was a couple meetups ago, where we talked about options on AWS to do things like chatbots, text summarization generation, image generation. And Amazon Bedrock is our service for doing really simple API calls back to these foundational models to accomplish that. You can see all the models available there today. The good news is that those credits that you can get through the Activate program can now be used to pay for your cost on using those models. Next, we've got the well-architected framework review. It's a mouthful. So AWS has been operating in the cloud for a long time, and they've put together best practices, their best guidance on how to operate. We call it the well-architected framework. And maybe you've been building and operating for a while, and you have some concerns about your app and how it's doing. Maybe your customers are concerned. You want to double check on things like security or cost. In a well-architected review, you work with experts at AWS to take a look at what you're doing. Using tools and analysis of your architecture, they can help to identify areas for improvement, things that are concerning, and do it across these 6 pillars of the well-architected framework. Again, this is something you can access through that startup's website. This isn't something you do once. Like, as a startup, you're going to be constantly iterating, right? So you're going to do this as those concerns pop up. You're going to want to take a look at what you're doing. There are guides available. You can do a lot of this yourself. There's tooling, but there is an option to work with AWS to get their help. Now as we transition into growth mode, we've got customers, we want more of them. We've got revenue, we want more. Here are the ways that AWS can help you at that stage. The first one is also on startups.aws. And there's a number of accelerators. They're multi-week programs, some of them with funding attached. And they can help you in a particular industry or based on characteristics of your startup to get access to experts to help you to move your startup to the next level. If you go to startups.aws, you can see all the accelerators currently going and apply for them there. These next 2 really apply if the thing that you're building can be used by other customers using AWS. Maybe it's a SaaS solution, maybe it's, you'll see the categories in a moment here, but the first one is about the AWS Marketplace. So as a customer on AWS, if you need a solution and it's not provided by AWS, you can go to the Marketplace, and there's all these third-party tools that with just a couple clicks you can get them installed in your account. And then invoicing flows through your AWS invoice. So all in one place, you can add these tools and get invoiced all together. Here's a selection of things you can find there. Like there's Snowflake, data warehousing, New Relic, application performance monitoring, F5 for security appliances, PagerDuty, the bane of many engineers' existence. But you can add those to your account and then pay for them through your AWS account. But if you are making a solution like that, you can list your product in the marketplace. One of the biggest pains, if you're in that segment, is that business sales cycle. if you're trying to sell something to a business, like weeks, months, quarters go by trying to get through that sales cycle, and startups don't have that kind of time. So you can get your product in the marketplace, and then those businesses can just click, install, and the invoicing starts. This next option is similar if you're selling to other businesses. AWS has a partner network, and you can join that network so that when the sales team at AWS is talking to customers and they recognize that your solution could solve their problem, they'll sell it for you. And they'll recommend those solutions and they'll work with you. So if you reach that stage and have a solution for other customers, this one could really help accelerate things. Any questions on the programs and other offerings for startups? Yeah?
So for the build fast section with asking that expert and also build, are we able to kind of use that to help us with building our MVP at a faster pace? Or is that you have to get to a certain point, then let's talk, after that?
It's probably, yeah. Those are probably a better fit as you're a little further along and are encountering a really specific problem and need the help to quickly get past that, right? We'll talk about in a second some resources for that earlier stage. Like you've got a blank slate. How do I build? How do I do self-service building? How do I get help? But yeah, those build programs, kind of that next stage where you've already got something operating. Yep. Any other questions on those programs? All right. Next. Startups are fun. They're risky. They're scary. I've been there. And, part of that thrill is that everything's wide open. There's just all this opportunity, and with it, all that risk. The thing that you're solving is probably unique. No one's ever done it before. That's why you're doing it. When it comes to building on AWS, I want to give you a paved road. Like, you're doing something unique, but the thing you're going to build on AWS, someone's probably done something similar. So here are some tools to help you so you can focus on the other part of being a startup, of getting customers and building something cool, and accelerate what you're actually developing on AWS. It starts with learning. You might be totally brand new, knowing just enough to get in trouble. So we're going to talk about how to do a little bit of learning before you build. We're going to talk about some tools to accelerate your building. We're going to talk about the architecture, those pieces of the building blocks that you're going to build to power your application, and then how to keep your costs under control. So that same account, the builder ID that you create for startups.aws, you can use to sign in to Skill Builder. This is an official product of AWS. It's by the training and certification team, and there's hundreds of free trainings on there. You can look through by product. There's kind of a paved road of learning based on your role or what you want to learn. A lot of those end in a certification. So whether you take the certification is up to you, but along the way you're learning to get that knowledge as you prepare for the certification. Is there anyone here who has an active AWS certification? Okay. Is there anyone here who has more than one? All right.
Working on it.
Working on it. Which one do you have?
I have the cloud practitioner one.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, I brought something here. Here, you can have Official AWS notebook. There you go. There you go. So, did you know that there's now a Gen AI certification? There's a foundational level 1 and an associate level 1 focused on AI. So, if you're interested in those topics, it's a great way to follow the path here for the learning, and then you can take the exam to get the certification. But congrats on. Which one do you have, Maria?
I have a foundational one, working on the
Cloud.
solutions architect now.
Okay, super. All right. If you have questions on those, chat with me after. I helped to write a couple of them.
Now we know who to blame.
I like writing the hard ones.
As a side note on that topic, when we run our meetups, people that use the group, we occasionally, not every single meetup, but we always try to have some credits to give away to people when they practice or, work on their skills
Yeah.
further. So it's, trying to encourage the certification element.
Awesome. That's Skill Builder. Free trainings. There are so many good resources out there now to learn how to build on AWS. AWS publishes to YouTube. They publish talks from reInvent. There's a ton of content, but Skill Builder is the official source. The Amazon Builders Library is kind of the next level. So engineers at Amazon decided to share their secrets. They've solved a lot of problems. They have encountered a lot of engineering challenges. And in the Builders Library, they've shared their solution. They are cool. And they're problems that you probably haven't even thought about, but they've already solved. And you won't encounter a lot of those in your early days. But go take a look, because they teach some engineering and architecting principles that you can use early to avoid having those problems. They're great reading. Builders Library. Next is Amazon Q. So this is the Gen AI powered assistant that you'll find on almost every AWS website. In the documentation, you can look for that little icon. It's in the bottom right. If you're signed into the console, look for the Q, that's the purple one. Look for the little chat bubble there. So if you're in the documentation, you're confused, you don't know what a term means, you're having trouble finding something, click on that and then have a chat about it. Tell it what you're trying to do. It'll tell you the command line to run. It'll tell you exactly where to find things. And at the bottom of its response are the links to the documents where you can read more. If you're on the console, you're in your account and working on your infrastructure, maybe you've got an error message or you're trying to do something specific, Q can help you there too. All right, next up, tools. Speed's super important as a startup. And I'm going to show you some tools that will help you be fast. And I'll tell you before we even talk about them that you will outgrow these. Like as you develop more complex solutions, these are no longer a good fit for what you're trying to do. When that happens is, it's going to depend on you and how you're building, but these are focused on speed. I remember once we were doing a pitch to a venture capital firm, and all we had was an idea on a slide deck. We gave our pitch, and then they said something to us that was simultaneously awesome and awful. They said, "Can you come back in a week and do a demo for a bigger group?" And we of course said yes. And then for the next week, my partner, who was on the business side, slept well, and I did not. And I wrote the code as fast as I could to do that demo. And there are times like that where you've got to build something. You have to add a feature. You've got to produce something for a customer, and these tools can really help you to move quickly. Code Catalyst is this all-in-one tool that can help you get started using blueprints. There are blueprints for different applications, and if you're just starting from scratch, Catalyst can help you get started. There's a code repository. You can use third-party ones too, but it'll host your code for you. It will deploy it for you. It will host it for you. It creates automated CI/CD pipelines. It has a place where you can track issues so you can know what to fix. Amazon Q is now integrated directly into it. And so I did this one. I said, all right, Q, I want to build a React app. I need APIs, I need a database, and I want to do it in TypeScript. And Q recommended a blueprint for me, and it was kind of a to-do app. And in just a few clicks, it had fully deployed it, and I was in VS Code editing that React app to add the features that I needed. So try Code Catalyst. Really, really great place to start. If you're more comfortable already with AWS, or you're more comfortable with the command line, Amplify has a package of tools. There's a command line tool, there's a JavaScript library, there's a web management tool where you can manage your database, your deployments. It provides hosting and similar to Blueprint's prepackaged solutions. And with just like a few steps, you can have a 3-tier application that has authentication, has a database that's hosted using CloudFront, and you can use, there's a lot of frameworks supported. So on the server-side rendering, you can use like Next.js, single-page applications like Angular, or static site generators like Hugo or Jekyll, things like that. If you've used Amplify in the past, there is now version 2. The great thing about version 2 is it uses CDK under the hood, so it's extensible. This one can grow with you, and you can keep adding features as you need them.
You might want to tell people what CDK is.
We will. Hang on to that thought if you don't know what CDK is. But if you've used the old Amplify, just know that version 2 is much different. Amazon Q, that same thing that powers that chatbot, you can put right into your IDE, your code editor. There's support for VS Code, for the JetBrains tools like IntelliJ, and Visual Studio. You connect it. The only account you need is that same one we've been talking about, the Builder ID, and then you get access to Amazon Q. And unlike the other one, this one knows about your application. So you can highlight a selection of code, and you can say, all right, Q, explain this to me. What's this doing? And I've done this one. You can say, this is breaking on this line, and I'm getting this error. Why? And it'll tell you. Another thing I've been using it for is writing unit tests. No one likes writing unit tests, right? So you can give it a whole file, a whole class, and say, I want to write tests for this code, and it'll insert that code for you with all the unit tests. Derek's tip here on tools. The AWS console, where you click around on the web, is a powerful way to explore and see what's happening with your applications. The CLI takes things to the next level. That's the command line, right? You can type out commands to do the same thing. Behind the scenes, AWS is all APIs. So whether you're clicking around or running on the CLI, you can accomplish the same. If you want to be a fast power user, the CLI helps you get there. You can take those commands, you can save them, you can script them, you can run them over and over, and save you from having to click around in the console. All right, next we're going to talk about architecture. We talked about the well-architected framework, and this is the link where you can go and read it. It's a great place to start. These are the very best that AWS can teach you on how to architect your application. And revisit it. Get to know those pillars, and if you have questions about how to do something, check here first, and follow these best practices. Next, I want to talk about not really making a diagram, but having a plan. Because now that you know the principles and you know the problem you need to solve, Code Catalyst has blueprints, Amplify has its templates. You should come up with a plan. Before you start building, draw it out. Use a whiteboard, use whatever tool you want, but have a plan. Know what it is you're going to build. Now that you've got that captured, when you need help, that's really easy to show someone. Here's what our architecture is, what's going wrong. When you add a new developer to your team, that's a quick way for them to get up to speed on how it works. Get a picture, save it in your code repo alongside the app, and then update it as you iterate and make changes to your architecture. If you've ever seen the really polished looking ones, like this one from AWS, I'll tell you the secret of how they make those. This URL right here has all the official icons. It has the boxes. And they're just made in PowerPoint. It's not a special tool.
For what it's worth,
Yeah.
Draw.io
Yeah.
has all of these icons, and it's great.
So the comment was, Draw.io has these icons as well. If you go to this URL, you'll see lots of third-party tools that have the icon set, so you can make really polished-looking ones. So you can use the tool of your choice. I use PowerPoint. You can download an icon set here for a dark background or a light background. They're all there. But the point is just like have a plan. Make a picture of it, keep it updated. And don't start from scratch. I talked about solving unique problems, but having an architecture that may not be unique. Right? So like your React app might do something really cool, but somebody has hosted a React app on AWS before. Don't recreate that part. Serverless land has hundreds of architectures if you're using the serverless approach with things like Lambda and step functions. The reference architectures are really specific architectures for really specific problems. Prescriptive guidance has architectures, but also patterns and guides. Just how do you approach a problem? Check these. Just see if someone's already done it. Don't reinvent. Go look here. All right, next. We want to talk about infrastructure as code. Who can tell us what that is? Yeah.
It's using code to kind of document your infrastructure. So if
Yeah.
you have a Lambda, you say, okay, I'm going to document this Lambda in our code and deploy it. And when we push up our code, it'll deploy that infrastructure for us.
Beautifully said, right? So your application needs those building blocks. Infrastructure as code is just the way to define those in code. There's lots of tools for doing this. We had a meetup. The last one was about Terraform. Terraform and OpenTofu are very popular. I'll mention some names, CloudFormation and Crossplane. There are other ones. The point is, you want something you can repeat. You want something you can test. If I go into the AWS console and I click around and create my app, how could I do that again? How do I know what I did? And if I instead wrote that in code, I can do it multiple times. I can make a change and know that with confidence that that is the architecture that I have. If you don't already have a solution for that, I'm going to recommend CDK, the Cloud Development Kit. There's a couple really big advantages to CDK. It's actually code. A lot of the other tools, they're declarative, you write in YAML or JSON. With CDK, you're writing in a programming language, and probably the one that your application's written in. It supports 6 languages: JavaScript, TypeScript, Java, C#, Python, and Go. So as a developer, you don't have to go learn something new. You can use that language in CDK, and like you write code, and you just say, I need a Lambda function. Here are the parameters for it, and then CDK deploys that for you. The next big benefit for CDK, we talked about building blocks. Like these are small units. These are little services. In CDK terms, we call them constructs. And some constructs are multiple building blocks. I'll give you an example. I want to deploy my React app. I want to store it on S3, and I want to use a CDN, or CloudFront, to serve that to my users. There's a construct in CDK that allows me with just a few lines of code to tell it where my React app is, local directory reference, right? It knows how to build that app. It knows how to push it to S3 and how to connect that to CloudFront. And that's just with a few lines of code. So CDK lets you define all that infrastructure using code. It's secure by default. All those things that it's doing for you, it's picking the secure way to do them. Those best practices we've talked about, it's doing those for you. And so that S3 bucket that I'm using for my React app, it's not going to have public access. It's going to be locked down, right? So CDK is a great way to document all your infrastructure. A reason, for sure, for using infrastructure as code is so you can repeat it. And one of the biggest reasons why you want to be able to repeat it is because you want to deploy into more than one account. Did you know that you can have multiple AWS accounts?
Not only can you, should.
Absolutely. Did you hear that? Not only can you, you should. And large companies, enterprises, they're running hundreds of accounts because it's a way to separate teams and applications, but environments. My tip down there is about using separate accounts for your development environment and your production environment. Production is where your customers are. They're interacting there, their data is stored there. You want to keep that safe. Your developer environments where you're iterating, you're trying out new changes and new features, and if it breaks, only you know, maybe your team, but it's not going to impact your customer. And they're in totally different accounts. Using AWS organizations, you can link those accounts together so you can have it all in one invoice and control all those accounts. Start with at least those two. One for development, one for production. Grow from there. If you use our official landing zone and control tower products, you'll end up with more than that. But keep those separate. And if you've used CDK, you can make your change, deploy that to your dev environment, looks good. Now you can deploy that to production with confidence because you know it's the same. So,
worth mentioning that
Yeah.
you use Control Tower and you get the Identity Center, you get single sign-on. And the big problem with multiple accounts is you don't
Yeah.
want to have to manage people's permissions in each account. Control Tower
Yeah.
with Identity Center just makes that absolutely simple, and it cuts down on your sort of headaches quite
Yeah.
a lot. So it's not hard to have multiple accounts
Yep.
and have it be easy to manage. Control Tower
Yeah.
with Identity Center makes that.
Tim's right. So just to make sure you all heard that. So Tim was talking about the value of Control Tower. It's a service to help manage those multiple accounts. With Identity Center, it gives you one place where you can log in, and then you can pick which account you want to interact with. So you don't have to manage a bunch of accounts and passwords. It manages it all together. That's Control Tower.
Is that an AWS product?
Yeah. Yep.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the Identity Center is built into, it's one of the IAM services, and really easy to manage accounts. You can assign permissions to different accounts. Maybe some people don't need access to production, only dev, right? So you can manage all that there.
It also gives you centralized management of all your policies. So if you have somebody come in and say, well, we've changed our mind and we need to implement this policy, you do it one place and it tumbles down into all of the accounts that inherit that policy. So it gives you centralized, central pane of glass, one pane of glass for all your policies. Which, believe me, if you start getting a lot of accounts with a lot of things going on, it's got something. It saves you a lot of time.
This is the voice of experience. It might seem easy to manage a couple accounts, but get that in early because you're going to add more accounts as you go.
And by the way, it only takes about 20 minutes to set up control tower.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take long. So, I mean, it's no reason not to do it.
It's so easy to get those additional accounts. So, on the weekend, you get that crazy idea and you go register a domain name and you're like, oh, I'm going to build this thing. It's going to be cool. I also create an AWS account to go with that. And then by Monday, I haven't built it and then I forget about it, right? So anyway, but you can create those multiple accounts. There's no additional cost for that other account, right? And yeah, you have to pay for what you deploy in there, but the account itself is no additional cost. All right, let's talk about cost. Develop a really sharp eye for the words free tier. When you're looking at a product page and trying to pick which size to use or what deployment type or billing mode, there's 3 different types of free tier offers. There's a free trial, limited duration, something that's free for your first 12 months, and things that are always free. I'll give you an example of something that's always free. The first 1 million invocations of a Lambda are always free. So a Lambda could handle your API call. Think about that. That's 1 million API calls you could potentially get under the free tier.
Derek, can I give you a better example?
Yeah, please.
Cognito.
Oh, tell us.
50,000 monthly active users is free, and forever. So that means if your application has less than 50,000 folks sign in each month, it doesn't cost you anything. None of the other services are even close to that. So Cognito is a kick-ass way. It manages your users, who they are. It handles authentication and some limited authorization stuff, but it's a wonderful service and it's in the free tier.
That's fantastic. Cognito for user management in the free tier. Yeah.
Would you be able to repeat what you just said? Because I'm for sure going to rewatch the video later.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So for the recording, go and look at the free tier details for Cognito. Cognito manages users, right? So they're going to come and create an account for your website. Cognito manages that for you. And there's a free tier offer for Cognito, so you can manage lots of users for free under that tier. Cognito. All right, auto scaling. So many things on AWS can get bigger or smaller. You can do it based on demand or schedule. Look for the ones that can scale to 0. An example is DynamoDB. DynamoDB, it's a NoSQL database, and there's 2 ways you can pay for it. You can say, here's how much capacity I want, and then I'm going to pay basically a fixed amount for that every month. Or I can pay by request. So each time I use the database, I pay for it. Now as a startup, I'm going to have unpredictable traffic patterns. It may be hard to provision for that. I can auto scale. But if I want to scale to 0, meaning when no one's using it, I don't pay anything, the pay per request is a great way to go. In my developer environment, no one's actually testing on it. It doesn't cost me anything for those requests. And in production, maybe it's the weekend, maybe it's overnight, no one's touching my website. I'm not paying for that DynamoDB provisioning. So look for those things that you can scale to 0. In your developer account, there's lots you can shut down. If you've got instances running, shut them down at night and over the weekend. Find ways to bring things to 0 when you can. Yeah,
Tim.
Tim.
The thing about 0 cost with DynamoDB is it's the only database available in any of the cloud services that does encryption at rest for nothing. It doesn't cost you anything. It's the only one.
So
if you're building a secure application that specifies your data must be encrypted and it's stored, DynamoDB is your only free option.
Tim's comment is that DymoDB's encryption at rest is valuable because that's by default, and that is powerful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What about ECS?
ECS?
Yeah.
For
Just getting down to zero?
so in your task definitions, you can set the number that you need, and you can set that to 0 to bring it all the way down. So you can leave that task definition in place, but basically consume no capacity. Really easy to do on Fargate, which is serverless, right? Because you can tell I don't need any, and through scheduling and automation, you can manage that. Yeah.
Quick question, the difference
Yeah.
in latency when startup between Lambdas and Fargate, is that closed or is it still a big gap?
I don't know. It's a good question. The question's about
Because
the
Fargate used to take like 4 times as long as the Lambda one up.
the question's about startup latency on Lambda versus Fargate. Take a look at the Firecracker project that powers those. It's a container framework designed for fast startups. So I don't know. That's a good question. The last one's about monitoring costs. So if you're in the AWS console, you can access your billing dashboard where you can get charts and graphs, where you can do a cost breakdown. You can see by account, by region, by service, all of your costs. But look, the first thing you're going to do when you create that account is you're going to go set up a budget alert. And you're going to say, for this dollar amount, I want to know if I'm going to cross that. And you'll get an email, not just when you cross it, but it'll tell you, hey, it looks like you're going to cross that threshold this month. So set that alert up so you don't get any surprises. And if you're going to go and experiment with something, please remember to turn it off. Don't let that thing just keep running. That's the easiest way to run up an unexpected bill. Create yourself a little sandbox account. Do your experiments and tutorials there, and then just remember to turn everything off. That's it for cost. That's it for what I had here. If you're going to reInvent, come see me at Game 306. I'm going to be joined by Epic Games. We're going to be talking about how we got their Windows Unreal Engine to run inside Linux containers without Windows. But that's it for me. Thanks for coming.
Very good.
Any questions? All right. Yeah.
I'll be the question guy.
Yeah, please.
So me and my friend, we're working on a project, and we're currently just like the development of kind of the basic stuff, but then
Yeah.
we're also planning on, right now we're in the planning stage of building a computer vision tech for sports. And so we're going to use OpenCV.
Cool.
And then we ran into, might be a bad word, but Google Media Pipe, their product, and it's like object detection. Does AWS have something along the lines of that? Because we currently have a server set up to AWS.
Yeah.
So since I'm here, and I'm not the most technical person,
Uh-huh.
I might be a data engineer. I only work with SQL, but I don't count myself as an engineer.
Yeah.
It's just data or SQL. But yeah, I don't know if you know anything that could be helpful. That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
About maybe
That's where that free advice comes in.
We can chat more after, but
Yeah, definitely.
Recognition is the name of the service to look at. It's Recognition with a K, and it's a managed service for doing image classification and recognition. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, then help yourself to some free stickers, and thank you very much for coming.